Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in. You may be thinking, why am I showing a bunch of weeds here? I'm going to show you, I'm going to start making some of the, it's a Korean style. If you get the Jadam book, Jadam, they have it in there, and then David the Good kind of adapted it in what he calls Dave's Fetid swamp water. I'm going to make, I have a second 50-gallon drum, or 55-gallon drum, and I'm going to start making it. I don't know, I have to look, because I just got that Jadam book. I have to look and see kind of how much they say to put in a barrel as far as the weeds and stuff go, but I want to start making that. And so I'm just gonna start cutting. This banana tree here has a lot of weeds growing up, and this is something that you can do with the weeds. I'm just taking my little knife here, and I'm going to just cut some of these weeds and start putting them in the barrel that I've got. And then eventually what I'll do is get the right amount of weeds and whatnot, put a little bit of leaf mold in there with it, and then fill it up with water, let it sit for a few weeks, and then start using it. So yeah, that's what we're doing. So I will start doing that here. Just give me 1 second. So there we go. There's a nice clump there, just clearing some of that out. Trees don't like to have, I mean, technically bananas are not trees, but the point being, trees don't like to have a lot of weeds and stuff growing around them. That's why a lot of them like to have mulch. So it's good to, when the weeds start to grow up around a tree, and this even has some banana leaf in it, which that's good to add to. When weeds start growing up around trees, you don't necessarily have to rush and make sure you keep them completely flattened out and weeded out really well and all that stuff. Let it grow a little bit, and then come out and just harvest it. And I mean, essentially that's what you're doing, is harvesting it, and use it for this compost tea. Essentially that's what this is a compost tea. It's just an anaerobic compost tea instead of an aerobic compost tea. So a lot of people say that, you shouldn't use anaerobic because it's bad and blah 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 blah. it's fine. You know, it smells. Yeah, I mean, it stinks, but the plants don't care about that. Look at all my squash and zucchini flowers. And look, got a bee in there working for me. I love when the bees come out. But yeah, it really doesn't matter. It really does not matter. Other than like the stink, and I mean, unless you're planning on drinking some of it, then it doesn't really matter. So the plants don't care. The plants, you know, you can, what do you think goes into, and David's brought this up, what do you think goes into, I'm going to put this down and work as I'm talking. What do you think goes into your fertilizers and stuff? You know, a lot of your fertilizers are made up of blood and bone powder and feathers and stuff that come from these meat processing plants, and you know, they have manure from various sources and worm poop and all that. I mean, that stuff's gross too. So it's, I mean, it's just another one of those things. And you know, David's the one that kind of helped me see, like, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that people freak out about, and it's probably mostly because of the smell, when in reality, you know, there are things you can do to mitigate the smell, and in reality, the plants don't care. The plants, like David says this all the time, plants don't have noses. They don't care what it smells like, but it has nutrients. You know, all these, this is Spanish needles here, all these, this grass and all these, this is a wildflower, and some of these that people would term weeds, when they come up, they're pulling nutrients up from the soil into the body of the plants. So their leaves are taking nutrients, the flowers, everything's taking nutrients. And instead of just weeding, and I mean, you can weed it and mulch with it, that's another good thing to do, but a lot of people, you know, weed and then put it in a garbage bag and throw it away. Well, why would you do that? Take this, soak it in some water, throw a little leaf mold in there for some microbiome, and let it soak for a while, let it get hot and get nasty, and then, you know, filter it out, so you get some of the water, and you have to dilute it because it does get potent, but dilute it down and water with it, you know. And it's a good way to take what's naturally, the nutrients that are naturally in your soil and in your plants, and put it back in your garden. You know, you're recycling that way. So this also, Biden's alba, Spanish needle, shepherd's needle, stuff like that, you can take these leaves and cook them, soak them a couple times to get some of the bitterness out, and then you can cook them. And these little itty bitty ones you might be able to eat raw, but when they get to be full size, which, I mean, that's about full size right there, cook them and you can eat them. So people need to learn to view weeds differently, you know. Although I think I'm allergic to Spanish needle, because when I do this, my nose will bother me today. But that's a risk that I'm willing to take. I mean, let me not moon you there. But yeah, I mean, just come along in here, get the weeds. And again, you know, banana leaves are a good, this is kind of coming off the trunk there, but banana leaves are a good source of a good thing to throw in there too. So throw some of these in there. I've got that lemongrass growing over there. You can harvest that and throw it in there. I mean, there's so much you can do. All this, see all that right there? All that Spanish needle, any of this, any of your, when you come out to the garden and pull weeds. Now, a lot of these weeds, I take my swage hoe and cut them. And when I do that, I leave them where they are. I don't get rid of them. I leave them and they die and rot back into the soil. You know, and this right here would be a great thing to add to compost tea. If you've got Mexican sunflower, cut some of that, add it to the compost tea. You know, it's easy. Toss that in there. And now David, he throws almost anything in there. He throws food scraps. He throws, which you can, if you read the Jadam. I have the new second edition one that came out. I haven't read it all, but I've read parts of it that I was wanting to learn more about. If you read that, you can make a compost, or they call it a liquid fertilizer. You can make it out of really anything. Now, one thing where I'm gonna do things a little different than them is they say to basically, if you're growing strawberries, get a bunch of strawberry, like buy a bunch of leftover strawberries or rotten strawberries, that sort of thing, and throw them in there, and then use that to water the strawberries. Use it specifically, so like if you wanted to have liquid fertilizer for strawberries, get strawberries and do that. If you want to have liquid fertilizer for onions, get onions and do the same thing and water the onions with it. I'm going to differ from that. I don't have the time to come out here and get, okay, I want to fertilize my spaghetti squash, so let me harvest a bunch of the leaves, or I want to fertilize the cassava, so let me take some cassava and do that. Like, I don't have the resources, I don't have the time, I'd have to buy a bunch of different buckets, a bunch of different all that other stuff. So kind of, that's kind of where David kind of melds it all together. He takes it and just throws it all in the same thing, because just because it's cassava or spaghetti squash, or anything that you're growing in here, just because it's that doesn't mean it can only be used for that. It still has nutrients that can be used for other plants. So throw them all in there, and but I mean, he's throwing food scraps, he's throwing meat scraps, all that stuff. I've done that before too, and it smells really, really bad. But essentially, it's all going to work, because you're composting. That's essentially what you're doing, but you're composting in liquid, and but you're taking all this stuff that has nutrients. This all has nutrients. This grass, this sedge right here, and these flowers here, all this stuff needed nutrients from the soil to survive. And so in doing that, you're taking the nutrients, you're clearing out the weeds, and you're taking the nutrients, and you're not wasting them. You're putting them in the solution, concentrating it, then you dilute it down, and you put those nutrients back into the soil. Like right here, here's a dandelion. Dandelions are great. We'll put some of them in there. You can eat dandelions. You can eat the leaves. You can eat the flowers. Not the poofy part, but when it's an actual flower, not the seed heads. But yeah, I mean, why not? Like, here's an old vine. We'll take that. That's an old, probably an old pumpkin vine. Throw it in here. Just any of this. Make sure I'm not stepping in an ant bed there. Any of this stuff. So, David talks a lot about how you can change kind of the way you see weeds. You can change the way you kind of view weeds. How about that? To, instead of it being just annoying nuisance, gonna destroy your garden type thing, it's a form of fertility for your garden. Take it and pop it in some of his swamp water, as he termed it, and he would. But This is just, you're talking about making your own fertilizer like I talked about in another video. This is what you're doing. So if you could never get fertilizer again, you have fertilizer right here. Don't throw your food scraps away. Either compost them or put them in a solution like this. You just made your own fertilizer. You don't have to go buy fertilizer. And there's probably going to come a time here shortly where if you don't start doing this right here, or don't know how to do this, it's going to be hard to grow a garden. Unfortunately, we don't have soil that's naturally fertile. Like a lot of places, it's not this super fertile, loamy soil. So, we've got to do something to help it. I may be off screen here, but 1 second. So instead of, relying on the store, look at that taproot, look at that thing. Get the roots too if you can, because the roots have nutrients in them too. Instead of having to rely on going to the store to get fertilizer for your plants, you can make it yourself. You've got nutrients here. It's all growing right here. You've got nutrients when your crops are done. Whatever we're growing, when it's finished, and you've got some rotten fruit or something like that, rotten vegetables, don't throw them away. Put them in a solution like this. Yes, it's going to stink. Look at how this is. Wish I could get it to wrap back around, but it won't stay unless I zip tied it. Ouch. I don't know, but looks like I've actually got one actually growing here. The ones that I thought were growing were not fertilized, because obviously you can tell these are the female flowers because they have the fruit. That right there where my knife is pointing, that's a cluster would be male flowers, and I'm just now starting to get male flowers. Here's a male right here. That's a male. There's no fruit, see? And the males grow in these little clusters, and see, like there'd be a cluster right there. The problem is I need more females to bloom while the males start blooming, and all of a sudden the females have slowed down and the males are starting to bloom. But I think there's one that's probably going to bloom right up there. So I think, and there's some more along here, but I think both of these may have gotten fertilized. I think the bees have been at work out here. So, but yeah, I'm going to do this one last thing and then I'm going to call it a day. So I'm going to get these Spanish needles here and the sedge that's over here. See, all this is starting to grow into the black-eyed peas. I don't want it to grow into the black-eyed peas. This is for black-eyed peas. Now, you could take this and toss it in there. But the one danger with doing that is, ooh, that was almost my finger. The one danger in doing that is if any of these are starting to go to seed, which some of these are. I don't know about the sedge. If any of these are starting to go to seed and you toss it in there with your crops, the seeds will germinate, and then you'll have weeds growing in there. This will start growing in there. So one way to get around that but still get the benefits of this is to make the compost tea, and that's what I'm doing. But yeah, I mean, this is how you become more self-sufficient with fertility, with fertilizer. So you're not relying on, they're saying that fertilizer is going to be mega expensive because of what going on where. Well, don't rely on them. you don't even have to have a 55-gallon drum. You don't have to have that. Get a bucket. Go get you a Homer bucket, or get any kind of little 5-gallon bucket. Get you an old garbage can. You know, that's the first time I did this. I had a garbage can. I went and bought a garbage can with a lid and did this exact thing in that garbage can. In fact, it's still sitting over there. Now, it ended up with some holes in it. Some put there by me, some put there, I don't know how. And so I'm actually using it for my dry compost now. Right over there. That was the garbage can that I first used for this, and it worked. So yeah, you don't need one of these. If you can't get your hands on one of these, get a 5-gallon bucket. If you don't have a 5-gallon bucket, go buy one because they're cheap for now. Or get a garbage can like that. But yeah, you can get anything like that and make this stuff and come out to your garden, around your trees if you have trees, anywhere. If you mow the yard, gather up the grass that you just cut, toss it in and make some compost tea out of it. If you weed around the flower bed, same thing. Don't just, I mean, letting them stay there and rot into the ground is not a bad thing. That's not what I'm trying to say. But if you're just going to bag it up and rake it up, bag it up and throw it away, don't get rid of all that fertility. Stick it in here. So this spaghetti squash is taking over everything in here. There's a cassava coming up right there. I had a roselle growing right there. Didn't know what it was until I moved this out of the way, but look, got a nice spaghetti squash coming in there. This thing all of a sudden is not producing female flowers, but the bees have been at work over here. And the funny thing is, I have hand pollinated 3 or 4 of these and they didn't take. The bees pollinated that one, and now I've got a spaghetti squash growing. Bees are important, guys. All different bees are important. And there's the yam growing up right there. So anyways, that's just a little glimpse into making this compost tea. I'm gonna need a lot more than that in here. I would say probably, you probably want to fill it up at least halfway with solids, and then add you some leaf mold in there, add you some water. You could even throw some, if you go to the beach and you see some of the seaweed just sitting along, scoop some of that up, bring it back. Unless it's illegal, then of course I would never ever sell, never say to do that. Never ever figure out a way to sneak it by. Don't ever do that. Never. I would never ever say to do something illegal. But if you were to do something illegal against my better judgment, you could throw some seaweed in here and you'll get some of the sea minerals. You can throw things like kelp meal, alfalfa meal. You can just anything like that, So you can throw eggshells to get some of the calcium and that sort of thing, banana peels, potassium, all that sort of stuff. It's almost like the sky's the limit. So, but yeah, that's it for today. I know my videos have been a little more sporadic lately, but I just have to work around with the time that I have. But I do appreciate everyone who watches. I really appreciate you, and who subscribe and who are helping me to grow my channels. I'm thankful to have you with me. So yeah, until next time, I appreciate you watching. Please don't forget to comment, let me know you are here, and I'll be back soon with another video. Take care.